We were running basically 5 in the morning. I think it was a 4:55 a.m. class, and running all the way until there was an 8:15 p.m. class straight through. And so you're getting just, up to 40 plus members in there at a time, hour on the hour. I used to say it's always like, it runs like a hospital. Like it's never closed. You're open 364 days a year, and the only day you're closed is Christmas.
Bret Borock and his partner built 5 OrangeTheory's, one of them being a top 10 location nationwide. But Bret recently sold his portfolio. In this episode, we go through his entire journey with OrangeTheory. And now, he's all in on a new franchise, one that he says is even more lucrative than OrangeTheory.
I would say, just on a very conservative baseline, I would say OrangeTheory's do about 20 to 30%.
You're in 2 brands today that are very complementary. So Smash My Trash, so the dumpster crushing franchise, and then Heavyweight Waste.
Yeah, so we own a large portion of South Florida, both coasts. And so we cover a lot of ground. I believe in that it's about 20 territories that the brand would go by. It's a 35 to 40% margin business on Smash. And Heavyweight is, I think, going to settle in about...
Today, OrangeTheory is considered one of the fastest growing franchises of all time. It's one of the most successful franchises of the last 15 years, right? 2 have been founded in the last 15 years. And that's always obvious in hindsight that it was going to be a winner. So can you share, when was it, what year was it when you discovered it, and how did you ultimately become a franchisee?
OrangeTheory specifically in 2015 is when we opened our first studio in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it's so funny, Patrick. I had actually been running a sales organization at the time, and I was rolling through a Starbucks in San Diego, California. I believe the location was Point Loma. And at the time, I was like, this is a West Coast brand. I'm a Michigan guy. We live in Ann Arbor. I'm like, this is going to be the boutique option here on the West Coast. And lo and behold, I was at a bib pickup for a half marathon about a month later. And my today business partner, Matt, was actually standing at an OrangeTheory tent. And it was just one of those things that kind of came to me. And I was like, this is exactly what I had been looking for. This is exactly the concept that I was like, why are these people up at 5 in the morning just with full of energy? The lights were bright. It looked awesome. And at that time in 2015, I was really looking to transition into entrepreneurship. I knew I always wanted to own my own business. I wanted to be around like-minded people in the space. And I was like, this is a really cool concept. Super into fitness at the time. And one thing led to the next. I had a conversation with Matt, who him and his wife had actually just tried a class out in Colorado for one of the early adoption studios, and they were bringing it to Ann Arbor. And one thing led to the next. Matt and I never knew each other except for by chance at the OrangeTheory tent, and they were in the pre-sale process of opening the first one. And so 6 months later, we partnered up on almost like a test or a pilot to make sure we worked together well. The synergistic approach was there. And yeah, we ended up growing into 5 studios from there. So really got involved, learned the business from the ground up, from really the early adoption side of the franchise, I believe was kind of conceptualized in 2010. And so we were still early on in the process. Learning from that first studio up until, essentially when we exited was quite the experience.
And was there anything more, I guess, than this serendipitous encounter? Or did you think, and did Matt ever consider like F45 or Club Pilates or any of these other, now bigger boutique fitness brands? And of course, there's dozens and dozens more of them that haven't reached the heights that some of those other brands I just mentioned have. But yeah, was there like a diligence process in the fitness world? Or because when you met Matt, he was kind of already in on OrangeTheory, that was maybe just it?
I think it was more so just from a modeling perspective. We had thought that OrangeTheory had kind of figured it out, right? I think both of us were super into fitness at the time. We're looking for something that really was for everybody, right? There's so many fitness concepts out there. Whether you're a world-class athlete, you're probably sticking to one concept. You're somewhere in the middle, and I think everybody brings up like the old Curves model, right? Very women-focused, but also was adaptable for everybody. And then you have your big box gyms, whether it's a Crunch Fitness or a Planet Fitness, which also works too. But what we thought was so intriguing about this model was it was a small space. You had one coach for essentially up to 30 to 36 people in a class. And it really was for everybody, right? You could be a world-class athlete working out next to somebody who was just joining a weight loss challenge, working out next to a marathon runner, working out next to somebody that was just trying to stay in maintained shape. And so I thought that was one side of it. And then we looked at the other side with, is this, I guess I'll call it fatty, right? Is this something that's going to be a fad over the years? And we thought the technology component with the heart rate based interval training, obviously it was for everybody, and really the equipment and what they had and how the class was orchestrated, we thought it was going to be a home run. Obviously in 2015, we didn't fully know. We were trying to get up and running. We really thought that it had some legs, but based on all of the indicators, it was more so the model and being into fitness at the time, and we really didn't look at anything else. We had certainly talked to other franchisees that had started before us, did our due diligence. You look into all the economics that you possibly can. Essentially, anytime you start a franchise, that's what you're doing. But we had heard all good things. There wasn't really any negative to start aside from it's almost outgrowing what we're doing right now in a really fast way. And so it's one of those things. You cut your teeth on it, you get it open, you really try to figure it out. Yes, are there things to learn out the gate? For sure. But I think looking at it from a model perspective, we thought it checked all the boxes.
Between yourself and your business partner, how did you divide up the labor? As far as, is he wearing some hats and you're wearing specifically different ones? And has that evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's funny how that works. I mean, his wife and him were the first kind of, I guess we'll say, franchisees in this, and Matt and I really partnered on everything else. But Matt himself really looks at the structural, financial background of the business, making sure that we have healthy financials, really looking to pull all the levers in terms of just the structural side and understanding what it does to back it and make sure we're profitable. And I think he was more looking for me on the sales, marketing, get in there, learn the operation, work with the team, build the culture, and kind of be the glue amongst, the operational side of the business. And my full experience was in sales and marketing and had done that for quite some time. And his was more, he traded commodities and energy for 20 years. And so his analytical brain kind of mixed with my sales and marketing brain just has always proved us really well. It's allowed us to do a lot of different things. We both have the same morals, ethics, and different ways of maybe doing business, but at the same time trying to get the same results. So we work very synergistically and really divide and conquer. And you asked about, over the last number of years, we've certainly had our different modes of business, but also I mentioned dividing and conquering and understanding, okay, this is what Matt's lane is. Here's what he does really well. If I get a question about that, that gets kicked to Matt. And vice versa, right? Matt gets a question about something in the sales, marketing, people side of the business, I get kicked that. But we also work on things together. We talk things out. We understand what the common solution is. If there always is something to talk about. And so it's definitely been a partnership where we talk about the things that we need to discuss as a group. And then obviously on the day-to-day, we try to divide and conquer the best we can. I hope that helps answer that question.
And, transitioning back to that first Orange Theory location, before even getting into the launch of it and all that, what can you say about the brand at the time, as far as the founders, or founder, I should say? Are you guys in touch with them? Today, it's obviously, for those who don't know, 1,200 or so locations, and founder, private equity exit, all that good stuff. So it's a different company today in some respects than it was back then. But yeah, can you just give us any insight to what was the level of input there, and just anything you could say about how she even developed this model?
It's such an inspirational story. I think that's what I probably failed to mention that in the first part of the questioning on why Orange Theory, but they are so contagious and so energetic and understanding, and have really, I would say for Ellen more specifically, who founded the product, right? And she had one studio and she realized what she was doing was working, and all of a sudden teamed up with Dave Long and Jerome Kern and this group that had been in Massage Envy, and they have done all of these successful franchising concepts and models, and they linked together. And I think what was so impressive about Orange Theory was that they were able to put this brain power together alongside the fitness side of it, the technology side, the operations, and they were always innovating. And that was something that you saw every year, whether you went to a convention or you went to a summit, you always had new information, new technology, new people, new support. And I think that's what, you talk about the secret sauce in any franchise. Yes, the product was incredible, right? The product for the masses was incredible. But the founders and really the support staff and the original team around Orange Theory was so supportive and understanding of what the franchisees were going through that I thought it was really vital to the success early on. But they were also adaptive, right? They were people that, and a brand that, hey, if something's not working, let's change it. Let's figure out a way to evolve it. Let's continue to evolve over time to continue to stay ahead of the curve. And I mentioned fitness before is, I think if you were to ask just the general public about getting into fitness, they would most likely say, well, that might be a fad, or that didn't work, or hey, I'm not sure about that product. Orange Theory has had the staying power because of the founders, because of the people, and because of the franchisor. And not only was the product great, the systems were fantastic, the training was fantastic, and I thought that was all a top-down level approach. And really, you go to a convention, you would see tears in the crowd just from Ellen's speeches, right? She would get up there and keynote and would have a story about why people were feeling the way they felt or how somebody's life changed. And she always talked about the why behind it. And it really is. You talk about drinking the orange Kool-Aid, like it was very real. And a lot of people say it's a cult, but it's an incredible cult and culture to be a part of because of what it did for so many people. It wasn't just the people that worked there, the people that were behind the brand. It was the members as well. And I believe last year was the first year they actually had real members that joined studios or were members of studios at the national convention telling their stories or being part of the walkthroughs or being part of the different breakout sessions. And it really has a following because of what they built on the culture side. And I think that really came from like I said, Dave Long and Ellen and Jerome and many others along the way. But it was always inspiring to go. And I was really impressed with the franchise they put together.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a really good point. I have a general understanding, but even with the way you're talking about it, not as deep as I thought. And I would imagine then the audience probably has some gaps. You've touched on there's an inspirational story from Ellen of why she started it. And then you mentioned the entourage, so to speak, of someone from Massage Envy. And so it wasn't just someone had an idea and started franchising it. Like there was an intentional plan to grow this, and there's the technology piece that you mentioned. So do you mind, maybe we can back up and do you mind giving your version to the best of your ability of the Orange Theory origin story?
My understanding, and I probably I'm going to forget a few of the pieces, but I think what happened was it was either Dave Long or his wife, I believe, walked into Ellen's studio, which I believe the first was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and she had been in fitness for 30 plus years. She's a fitness professional guru to the nth degree, but she had a cult following. She had people that what she was doing worked. And somebody went into her studio, I can't remember who it was, but said, I don't know what she's doing, but this place is the real deal. And they still to this day have the table that sits outside of their corporate office that's literally a grated mesh 3-person table. It's a tiny little coffee table that the three of them had an original conversation about how Orange Theory was going to conceptualize. And I believe Dave Long and Jerome just said, Ellen, this is something you have to do. Come on board with us. Obviously, I believe she was hesitant in the beginning. She had this workout. It was working. But they were like, you have something we can grow, and we're the perfect partners for you. And so I think one thing led to the next. They had their first studio in Fort Lauderdale that turned into Orange Theory, and then they just kept opening location after location. But again, the secret sauce was that you would have a power walker, jogger, and runner category, right? So it corralled everybody. It wasn't just you're fit for that type of person. It was for everyone. And I think that original story of the three of them just kind of getting their heads together, almost convincing her to come on board. She was a single mom. She was somebody that was just trying to make it in fitness. And obviously we know the rest of the story has really, and she has a couple books out there. She does keynote speeches all the time, but just being around her radiant energy, and them too, of understanding how this originated, but really even more so how it's grown over time. The three of them, or I will say that the leadership group they figured out how to captivate an audience and create a product that works for everybody.
Back to that, you and Matt in 2015, you meet Matt, he's already selling memberships during the pre-sale process. So for folks who don't know, a lot of fitness-based concepts will, before they open, they start selling their memberships. The top brands are operating at a break-even or profitable level by the time they open because they should be able to sell enough memberships. So that's when Bret met Matt. And if I'm not mistaken, this store in Ann Arbor becomes one of the top 10 stores in the country. Was it just viral out of the gates, or what was that opening process like?
You certainly know the pre-sale process, and I believe we were one of the first studios to actually hit the 500 club, with opening with 500 members out the gate. So you had mentioned anytime you have a good pre-sale process, right, you're always going to have people walking in the door before the door actually opens, right? And once the door opens, you're at least break even, or you're making some money and you're doing the right things. And there also comes challenges with that, right? You have to fully operate without fully knowing how to operate the studio before it opens. And that location specifically was gangbusters out the gate. You open with 500 members within your first month of being open, which is kind of what that 500 club meant. And then it catches wildfire after that, right? Your friends start talking. The word of mouth starts going. Orange Theory always has done a great job marketing the brand. But really being able to be a top 10 studio was more about building the culture, building the experience, having out-of-the-box ideas to create an enhanced experience for the customer. But even more so, the product does the job, right? But what are you doing on top of the product to create a personal touch point, to understand what somebody who's just coming in for their first time needs? How do you break down the barriers? I'll shout him out here. We had a sales associate named Aaron Garner who we still continue to work with and talk to this day. He would make a birthday card for every single person that walked in, and it would be about this tiny little big with a picture or a caricature of them and a special little story or a recommendation to a restaurant that they might need to try out because of the cuisine they liked. It's those little touch points that we were able to do in a boutique model that you don't get in a big box gym. You're kind of scanning your key card and you're going in to work out. Nothing wrong with that, but the community and the culture and the inviting space was something that really separated us from the pack. And I think Orange Theory does an incredible job of that across the network. That's always what separated them as a brand, but really elevating that and understanding the voice of the customer every single day and making it feel like an individual personalized training session in a group setting. So creating the coach experience, right? They spend 80 to 90% of their time with a coach or a trainer. That's the secret sauce of the product. But also, how's that coach making touch points? How many times are they using their name? Are they form correcting? Are you making it feel, like I said, a personal training experience also connected with the front of the house experience, right? Of making sure that some people, they'd show up 30, 45, an hour early just to come in and hang out and connect with the staff. And having staying power with the staff was really important, less turnover. And when you're humming on all cylinders and you're figuring out what those levers are and making sure that customer service experience is like none other, that's what separates the absolutely phenomenal studios. And you can walk in and feel the vibe, and you get people from out of town being like, damn, this studio's badass, right? As opposed to, well, this is a good place to work out, which it is. And every member is certainly, they love their home studios. But when you have people coming in from outside, or they're a member somewhere else and they're like, that experience in Ann Arbor was incredible, that's what separates you.
I'm hearing this and I'm thinking, the franchisor, they're handing you guys the Orange Theory brand, lending or / licensing the technology for you guys to use. They're giving you the playbook from, okay, here's the workout classes that you can do. You need to go find a trainer, though, to be able to actually teach and instruct all the customers. So the levers within your control are the customer service and then the trainers, right? Not just hiring them, but retaining them. So how did you approach that? And what is that even like? Because that's just such a different, our last episode was with the Crumble Cookies owner. Just, they're not looking for those kinds of employees, right? A fitness instructor. It's just a totally different model with a cookie bakery than an Orange Theory. But yeah, give us some insight into how you approach that hiring process.
Yeah, so obviously talent is one thing, right, that you talk so specifically about, and what you're looking for. What are the characteristics? What are the traits? What are the qualities that that person has? And I will say, to touch base on Orange Theory specifically, your coaches have to be exceptional. They have to be exceptional. And the ones that aren't, they fall off. They're the ones that they don't get booked as easily. You start to get complaints about certain things because you're holding such a standard, right? So all of the things that we would look for were, it was funny, Pat, we would almost go into a interview or talking to somebody off the streets. I can't even tell you how many times I approached a waitress or a waiter that would just have this radiant personality. And it's something Ellen had talked about. Do the molecules get going when you talk to this person, right? Do you have that type of energy? And it was all about that personality. So when they would come in and you would see somebody, it was almost interviewing them without interviewing them. They would walk into the studio if they were coming in for an interview, check out a class, meet the staff, and you see them go and talk to 5 members they don't know. How do they treat the other part of the staff? How do they correspond with the other members that are walking out of class? Do they look overwhelmed? Is it something that they are starting to be contagious with in a space they've never been in? And so those were just some of the traits that we would look for, but also have them shadow a number of shifts to understand what they're doing, how do they interact once the honeymoon period phases out. And so learning that was a huge learning curve for us because we went through many coaches, and they go through a rigorous training process, which honestly cuts a lot of them out. Some of them don't make it. Some of them I've seen in tears. It's a very rigorous training process to be an Orange Theory coach because it is such a robust product. There's a lot to know. And frankly, I do not have a certification, but I went through the training and sat through the training because I needed to understand what went into it, but also how that was going to coincide with the sales team or the front of the house to see what that. They always call it breaking the glass. There's always something in between that it's one side versus the other. So we're trying to really bridge that gap. And having a great coach and an exceptional coach was something that we put a lot of time and focus on, but also at the same time, we needed to understand how to retain them. And we needed to understand how to keep them motivated. And so all of those things were super important to our process, not only from just a product standpoint, but continuing to train them properly, continuing to have good culture around them, continuing to really support them. And so those were just a few of the things that we would do. But to your point, that's somebody that's a much more integrated process as opposed to somebody who's working at Crumble Cookies, just a different employee. And so that does get challenging. I think, we talk about what a great model Orange Theory is. There's a ton of work behind the scenes to get the secret sauce on the staffing side.
Yeah, I would imagine that's just a key part of the equation. And yeah, you're not going to be able to grow to the success Orange Theory has without having something in place to be able to maximize that. And backing up maybe zooming out outside of the labor model, if we're just thinking about a typical Orange Theory, right? So you were part of 5 buildouts. Can you just break down, what's a framework for folks if they're looking at Orange Theory, maybe even fitness in general, but is it just, obviously you got to find your site, and then you need treadmills, you need your equipment in there. What's the build out and go to market buckets that you're going to have to check to get that investment open?
Yeah, so obviously, as you mentioned, you got your site selection that corporate is very involved in, right? You have to have the right amount of space. These are cool because they're a little bit smaller than what a Crunch or a Planet Fitness would be, right? So it's attractive from that model, but it has to fit the space right. So you go through corporate very diligently and they're like yay or nay, or hey, I have these modifications or whatnot. So they work really closely with you. The other thing, you have your franchise fees, you have your leasehold improvements and construction costs, which has varied from 2015 until today, is going to be very different, especially with the economy we're in, just in terms of what it was then to build one out, or the historical cost versus what it costs now to build one out. I would say back then you could probably build a smaller one for, $300,000 or $400,000, and I would imagine right now they're probably north of $1 million to build. And so that's where the model has certainly changed, and they've needed to stay ahead of the curve. But the other startups would, obviously, your pre-sale budget. You want to hiring people, you want to paint the town orange, you want to make sure that you're getting all the people in the door that you possibly can, so there's a heavy lift on the marketing end. Your initial inventory, licenses, insurance, obviously operating capital. It's a heavy lift before you open, no pun intended, but it's definitely something that and that's why selling pre-sale memberships is so important, is because once you get those 4 walls operating, you can make money day one, but you have to have the front end capital to do it. So I would say, just from a cost perspective, I know it's a big range, but I'll just go with what I know, and being, let's just call it $400,000 to $1 million to open an Orange Theory, obviously depending on market, size, space, all of the economic factors that are included. So I hope that answers some of your question. I would say the only other things I would mention, just obviously you have your royalties. That would more go into your operating expenses, but royalties and marketing fees and brand fund, that's all part of it as well. But I'll do the marketing pitch and sales pitch for Orange Theory. I think they do as good a job as anybody on the support side and regionally supporting. And I think that they've always done a good job adapting and being, incredibly supportive in anything that you need, especially on the front end. Right? Because that's where it gets overwhelming and you have a lot coming at you between staffing and build out and equipment and timelines and dates and cost, and bridging that gap can be very challenging. But I think Orange Theory's done a really nice job doing that.
Definitely. And I pulled the item 7, so from the most recent FDD in 2024, it's about 800 to 1.4 million. So
even more than I thought.
Yeah, a little bit higher, but everyone's seeing that across brick and mortar brands these days. The construction costs have just gone up, so
crazy.
It really is. But back to that first location, was there anything in particular? I would say 2015 through to right before COVID was really like the heyday of Orange Theory. All the operators I've spoken to were just not a single, yeah, absolutely, just firing on all cylinders. So do you attribute it to the brand? Again, did you get a great location in Ann Arbor? Was it the very first boutique fitness concept? So maybe people had never seen anything like this before in the market. Because to be the top 10, I just want to emphasize this for the audience, right? To be a top 10 store in that system, it's not a small feat. It must have been insane to operate. But yeah, anything else you can share on just like why you guys really had such an outperformer?
I think, been asked it many times too, and our location was fantastic. There's no question, location matters. We have a great market in Ann Arbor. Not only do you get the city and the residents full time, you also get a student influx of students from the University of Michigan that at the time it was one of the only boutique fitness options. It was the hot up and coming brand that they could access in some of the bigger markets, Chicago, New York, LA, right? And so they were familiar with it. They would all come in groups. So you would get that injection of student traffic outside of your full-time residents. Now, the location, as I mentioned, was fantastic. It was smack dab in the middle of town, easily accessible. But what I think really separated us, not only from, I mentioned customer service, but we focused so heavily on sales and selling when times were good. And I think that's a big misconception in our business world, is that, things are going great, we're just hammering away at sales, and oftentimes you can get stagnant. Oftentimes you don't have a well to go to if things slow down a little bit. And you had mentioned 2015 to 2019 was the pinnacle for us, was the very tip top, I think we got up to, I want to say, just over 1,300 members. That was busy. We actually had, to get to the point where we knocked a wall down, went into our neighbor's spot and added more stations and closed for 4 or 5 days because we needed to add the traffic. We were running basically 5 in the morning. I think it was a 4:55 a.m. class, which is the middle of the night for me, but hey, a lot of people up at that time, and running all the way until there was an 8:15 p.m. class straight through. And so you're getting just up to 40 plus members in there at a time, hour on the hour. So you can imagine what that does to your staff. You can imagine what the burnout can be like when you literally don't have time to eat. You don't have time to change over staff. You don't have time for a staff meeting because the place never shuts down. I used to say runs like a hospital. It's never closed. You're open 364 days a year, and the only day you're closed is Christmas. And so it got so jammed that it created some operational challenges just with, again, staff getting burned out, the constant flow of new intros versus managing the class flow, managing the staff, understanding what it takes to clean the facility, right? Huge on cleanliness. And so when you see those things starting to slip, you need to add support. And so I would say not only just from an operational perspective, we would have 3 people behind the desk where even today some people only have 1, right? And so we would make sure there's a manager always there on site. You have your 2 sales associates, and then you would add another person as well. So we'd have 4 people back there at any given time. But the reality is that we continue to sell. We continue to enter new markets or events that we hadn't been to before. We would join all the running clubs. You would be in the community. The grassroots guerrilla marketing efforts that Orange Theory preached, they freaking work. They work. And that was something that a national brand, especially in fitness, I hadn't seen really before, right? You make this national brand, the Orange Theory model or the Orange Theory brand, it stuck out, but it never felt like it was a McDonald's, or it felt like it was a national brand or something that was cookie cutter. It felt like a community. It felt like something that was cultural in the space where everyone felt comfortable. And so we would try to make it feel that way. Hey, this is one studio, mom and pop, locally owned in Ann Arbor with the same staff that you see every day, where you were excited. If you had a bad day at work, okay, not everyone loves to go work out, but you were excited to go to Orange Theory. And so we always sold when times were good. We were always doing events, making sure that we were in the community. We were face to face. I can't tell you how many tables I set up and tents and things around town. And we would hammer away at leads. We would make sure that we're following up. As soon as that lead gets injected into our system, they're called within 10 seconds. That's that important, because guess what happens, Pat? You don't call them within 10 seconds, they're probably going somewhere else or looking at another option. So we put in systems in place that really made them feel like they were the only member we had, and we had a lot of systems surrounding that. So I think those are just a couple of things that really set us apart, and really just creating the experience at the point of sale as well, and what went into that process. And we've had corporate people come in and just take some of the things that we were doing at the time and saying, this is different, right? And it wasn't against corporate guidelines. We were just changing the way it was done, or maybe saying something a little different, or creating a different experience for that customer where it didn't feel like it was a sale.
Were you employing some of your tactics and maybe just experience from what you were doing before Orange Theory? Because I know you mentioned, right, you had your career was largely in sales up until Orange Theory. So were you kind of applying those
principles?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Big focus for me. I just have always been of the mindset that leads are gold. People are seeking you out. And if they're not, you better go and find them, right? Always bang on doors, do the things you need to do. Because if you're not out there, your phone's not ringing. And so that was something that was incredibly important to me right when we got rolling. Was I'm taking a look at the lead queue, so to speak, right? Say there's, for example, 300 leads in there, and those leads haven't been called in a week. My head exploded. I'm like, what are we doing here, right? I know it's a lot in the startup. I know what's going on. I know there's a lot to handle. But at the same time, like, these leads are golden. They need to be treated that way. So we completely changed our process. We completely attacked them. And that does come from my background in really attacking that and being responsive. And is there anything worse when you're trying to get a hold of somebody, or trying to call a company or a large corporation? You have to push 5, 6 times and then you get disconnected. There's nothing worse than that, and I never want that. We can never be that. And so implementing those sales processes of understanding how vital the lifeline of this business is to the sales aspect, that was something that I implemented very quickly. And then we just adopted as a group. We adopted as a team and went from studio to studio, and obviously duplicated it across time.
Amazing. I mean, I could see how just that approach combined with the rising popularity of the brand, it's no surprise that you guys dominated. Can you take us through, we're not going to be able to get to everything, of course, but the next 4 units, because you launched location number 1, it's a major outperformer, top 10 store in the country, but you still manage to handle that location. It's a good problem to have, but having a location that busy must have taken a lot of time and energy to get somewhat under control, although I bet it probably never felt like you fully had it under control. But again, you still managed to build 4 new stores on top of that. How'd you approach doing that? Did you end up having to hire a manager for store number 1 to oversee it because of the outsized success? And what was the scaling approach for you?
It was definitely a process, and understanding where we were in that process was vital, right? We knew that we had a really good product. We had something really going, but we needed to make sure that we could support that studio and open another one at the same time, while making sure that one started out the gates quick and understanding what that process looked like. So we had a studio manager who did a fantastic job of stepping in and really just, in the beginning, you go through a few of them, right? There's not necessarily a perfect fit right out the gate, but we had one that really just nailed it, was there all the time, understood what the studio needed and what the support looked like. And so we felt really comfortable about going through the next step in the process and opening our second studio, which happened to be in Ann Arbor. So we had a second studio just, I think it was about 3.5 miles away, but we knew the market could support it, but we needed to make sure that we could support it and we could obviously be profitable doing it. But I think what happens is that you see success obviously follow hard work, but even more so risk. The more you take it, the more comfortable you get. And so the first one, we're like head spinning, no idea what's going on. All right, let's just figure this out. And the second one was, all right, we need a studio manager that's going to keep this thing stable. We need a great staff. We need great coaches. And we need to support it from, like I said, out the gate to make sure that it has people coming in day one. So to get that second studio supported, I did it along with Aaron, who I mentioned earlier in this. We went and set up in front of the new location with the lights didn't work. There's no heat or air conditioning in there. You have basically just a sign and two people sitting outside of a tent saying, hey, here's what's coming. And again, the people on the north side of town had no idea what Orange Theory was. There was that big of a market for what we were doing. And so it's incredibly important that in the beginning, sales is everything. So telling and explaining why this product that's coming and building the excitement is so vital. But at the same time, you have to still support the other studios. So getting the right people in place, giving them the autonomy to do their jobs and do it well is so important, and supporting them throughout. And as you do that, you get to the second one, you get the second one open, you get your people in place, the product becomes easier because you're familiar with the first. So now the technology is even a little bit better. The support from corporate's even a little bit more. They're continuing to grow. And oftentimes we said like, hey, we feel we're even outpacing the support because that studio grew so quickly. But at the same time, you are starting to add the infrastructure along the way with main pieces as a part of your leadership team to continue to build out more studios. And I would say the first studio is always the hardest. I think that's probably the case in most brands. But at the same time, once you do two, it gives you even more confidence to do three, and so on and so forth. And we just built a phenomenal team, man. I can't stress enough how important people are. I think you've probably heard that in your experience and what you do. But man, I would say just the people and the team that we built really made this thing go. And so we utilize that for every studio, put our knowledgeable people when we're opening a new studio to continue to open it and open it right, and then build from there. Along with corporate support, which I think is in any brand, they continue to grow as well. So we were able to do it.
It sounds like there was never really an inflection point on the journey. It was more just each unit, it got progressively easier because it sounds like you were doing the right things along the way. Sometimes an owner, they're not able to really build that infrastructure as they're scaling. Location 2 or 3 could break them because they're trying to be the owner-operator in all three.
It's impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Transitioning to, I know this because we chatted before, but let's just jump to February 2020.
Ooh,
you guys were
forward, man.
Yeah. So you guys were thinking of exiting. Can you share whatever you're willing to on the size of the portfolio, number of units, any other financial metrics you're willing to share? And obviously the audience knows what happened soon after February 2020. But yeah, give us just a summary of kind of what went down in your world of Orange Theory.
Yeah, crazy times, man. Crazy times. I'm not the first to tell you that, and certainly won't be the last, especially when it comes to potential exits or the timing of COVID and what it did for people's businesses. But yeah, for me, it was the single hardest time in my life. And at that time, and we talk about 2019, that was the pinnacle. That was the very tip top of what OrangeTheory's were doing. And about capacity for one location was the Main Street location in Ann Arbor, as I mentioned previously. It was humming, but it was creating other issues just operationally because we were bursting at the seams. But again, great problem to have. We built a portfolio. We actually had 4 studios in Michigan, 2 in Ann Arbor, 1 in Brighton, 1 in East Lansing. And then we had a small share in a studio down in Bowling Green, Kentucky, which actually still operates today with 2 partners there. And they do a fantastic job, and they're still in the model. But had a deal with a PE group that was at the LOI phase that was going to get done. And that was really early February. And obviously we didn't fully know what was going to happen in March of 2020, but never really kind of hit me until it hit me. And it went from penthouse to outhouse very quickly. We went from a deal on the table to no deal at all, not knowing when our studios were going to open again. We went from, let's call it 1,300 members at the Main Street studio to, it pains me to say, but let's just call it 300 or 400. Really within a month's time, we were shuttered for 6 months at our studios. Michigan was very stringent upon reopening. Fitness was something that wasn't known, obviously due to COVID. They didn't know anything really, right? So it was something that they were trying to navigate through the times, and it really impacted us in our industry harder than most. I know restaurants certainly got hit hard. A lot of business got hit hard, but fitness was one that got hit amongst the hardest. Going from a deal or a really life-changing type of opportunity in many ways, looking to maybe do something else, transition financially, all of those things, really went from this is happening to I don't think this is going to happen. And that went from, okay, well, if that's not going to happen, we got to get our business back. We have to figure out how we're going to do this and how we're going to claw our way and scratch and claw to build our membership base back, to understand what the new times were going to look like. We were doing outdoor workouts, as many studios across the country were trying. And again, didn't just affect us, but from our perspective, obviously it was going from exit to getting back in. When we were finally able to reopen, that landscape and that footprint looked a lot different. We had to rebuild our membership base. We had to re-employ new marketing tactics. We had to hire all new staffs. We had to change our process, right? Everything went from let's just jam out every single class to, all right, our first and number one priority is making this place clean. Not that it wasn't before, but now it had to be at extra level. And so really doing all of that to understanding what the new world was going to look like, it was challenging, man. I will say, many sleepless nights, many things that still to this day scar me, and some of my mindsets and some of the things that I've had to work on personally just because of it. I mean, it was a traumatic experience from a business perspective. And I will also say it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in being able to persevere and get through something like that. When you go through an event like that, you really realize what's important. You really realize what you have. And I think for me, it's just like always, I was always, hey, how do we continue to grow and grow and grow and grow? And I always forgot about the present. I always never was where my feet were. And I think that's something that I've really learned today in going through something like that was scarring. And I think Matt and I both have been on the record of saying it was a really scarring, burnout, life-changing experience for us, because we went from this deal to almost having to close the studios. We didn't know if they were going to make it. And so being able to get them back to, let's call it close to 80%, and bringing on a new staff and reestablishing culture and continuing to sell in different times was something we're incredibly proud of. But the perseverance it took and just the attitude that, hey, we have to do everything we can do because we're not willing to lose what we had, was something that honestly I will cherish forever, because it's something that has shaped me to be the way I am now.
And you ultimately, you alluded to it, right? Exited eventually, but that wasn't until 2024, correct?
Correct. So we just exited in November of 24. Two great, fantastic operators who have current studios. They are tremendous guys, wanted to reestablish and grow their portfolio from the studios that they had, and are doing a fantastic job. They believe in the brand. I think Orange Theory, as I mentioned earlier, has continued to evolve, continue to grow. But even more so, they stuck through their franchisees during the times. They made concessions. They tried to figure things out. They really did everything they could to provide breaks for their Zs, right? It's really important. And so we were able to finally put something together. It was time for us we built them back up to a really good spot for somebody to take over. And we were looking to enter something new and do something fresh. And by the end of it, man, we looked at having them from 2015 up until 2024, at the end of 24, so almost 10 years. But, let's just call it 4 of those years were not what 2015 through 2019 were.
And I would imagine as you were trying to sell the portfolio the first time, you were probably at a point mentally where you were ready to move on then. And now we're talking about an additional 4 years that you ended up operating it. I mean, in the world of operating a small business, that's a lifetime. That's another tour of duty, or multiple tours of duty, right? So, yeah, I couldn't even imagine just the range of emotions. And then
we felt we nailed it. We nailed it. And it was such a great time. And then to have that happen and then have to jump back in with the current times, you're exactly right. It felt like a lifetime. It really did. So the perseverance it took was, like I said, I don't give myself a lot of pats on the back, but sometimes I'm just like, hey, I'm just proud of myself for powering through that, and Matt and our entire leadership team, because that was something that was just something else.
And this is the last question, and I'd love to pivot to the waste business that you're in. Is there anything you're willing to share? Because like Orange Theory does put revenue numbers, and they have some FTDs they don't, but then they'll There's a few years they do, and like the most recent FTD, they do share revenue numbers across the franchisee base. I've heard of margins from specific owners, but do you have a general rule of thumb for margins to memberships, meaning like your top location at 1,300 members, which I know is not the norm, but anything on just margins for owning an Orange Theory?
I can speak to like when we were in it, right? Or
Yeah,
you know, basically, I don't know exactly where they're at now or even, you know, what's been most recent, but I would say just on a very conservative baseline, I would say Orange Theories do about 20 to 30%. Some might be a little less, some might be a little more. Obviously, a lot depends on your footprint. It depends on your square footage. It depends on how many members you have. But today's break-even number is very different than what 2017, 2018 break-even was. But once you hit that certain member threshold is when that gravy train kind of starts running, because you do have one coach per, let's call it 30 to 45 people, as opposed to a one-on-one model where if you're doing personal training or something else that's more of an individualized experience, obviously the margin isn't quite there. So I would say just very broad conservative level, 20 to 30%, I think from a margin perspective is reasonable. But like I said, some might be less, some might be more.
That's really good insight. And yeah, it just shows you how, I mean, that was really the golden era. I mean, I've spoken to a Papa John's franchisee the other day. Yeah, and I mean, but he's grinding to get 8% margins. So, right, like the profitability there. And obviously, I don't think anyone goes into food and beverage thinking they're going to get fitness level
50%.
Yeah,
right.
It's just a different game.
Yeah.
So finally exit, and I'm hoping you took some time off after that.
Man.
But
maybe a little mental time.
yeah. I'll save the suspense for the audience. You're in two brands today that are very complementary. So Smash My Trash, the dumpster crushing franchise, and then Heavyweight Waste. And so you actually now can provide the dumpsters to businesses that you're then having your Smash business crush up. So almost like a vertically integrated franchise portfolio here. But take us, how do you get from holy crap, I finally sold this portfolio, I'm going to take a break, maybe, to let's get into the trash business? You got to fill the gaps in for us here.
I'll fill it for you as raw as I can here, Patrick. So actually, it's just kind of crazy because we thought we were exiting in 2020. So we were looking for what's next? What are we going to do? What do we want to get into? What's appealing to us? What models seem to make sense? And it's funny enough, we went from sexy fitness to trash. Right? Very, very different, not only industries and spaces, but really the model itself went from brick and mortar and business to consumer to a full disruptive trash business. And it's funny, right? I mean, you mentioned you're a member at Orange Theory. I'm sure you have friends or family members that are members at Orange Theory. And I think after 10 years of hearing about my wife's sister's brother's cousin's friend belongs to the one in Norfolk, Virginia, right? It's like, oh, that's great. I appreciate them part of the network, but like it just gets to be a lot, right? And so you mention trash. You're like, oh, great. What are you having for dinner tonight? Right? Like it's a totally different conversation. So I'll step back just a tad. So back in 2020, we were really looking at what was next. And as you know, as well as anybody, the franchising world, as large as it is generally pretty small in stature. Multiple franchisees know large franchisees and other concepts or have been to the same conferences or have been in a similar brand or similar space. So there's a lot of commonality amongst the people. And we had been approached by somebody that came to us with a couple different models and had known we were entrepreneurs in the franchising space. And he pulled up trash and Matt and I looked at each other and were like, dude, that's awesome. Like it's just something so different. And at the time, as I mentioned, we're looking to exit and start something brand new. And so that to me probably was the toughest transition because we went from not selling Orange Theory to also now adopting at the time, which I believe was the largest footprint of territories in a brand new brand in a different state. And so now we have the Orange Theories that are closed and shuttered for 6 months while adopting an entirely new brand and having to figure that out in a different state during COVID. And at the time, I'm somebody who I don't try to tell anybody or explain anything to anybody that I haven't done myself. It's super important. It's just the way I was raised. And I'm surprised my wife is still married to me at this point, but We had a 6-month-old at the time he was born in February of 2020, and we decided to go do this trash thing. We weren't open in Orange Theory. I'm like, hey, we need to figure this business out. We've signed all our franchise agreements. Hey, business is mostly open in Florida. So we moved down there. 6-month-old during COVID in August of 2020. Imagine trying a disruptive product in a space nobody cares about, knows what they're dealing with, behind a mask, speaking a different language in certain cases. Very, very challenging. So the first 6 months of that, I will tell you, Patrick, were amongst the 6 toughest months of my life. But getting into trash and understanding it. But again, this is all part of it. It's part of learning. It's part of digging your teeth in and really figuring things out. And I fully believe the people that aren't successful in franchising are the ones that are always looking for an out or to blame the franchisor or blame something other than themselves for figuring it out. It's not always the case, but I do tend to see that's the case a lot. And we moved down there. I walked door to door and followed up. I followed up again. I followed up again. No one's responding. Nobody's giving me the time of day. I'm basically sitting there with a Tonka truck saying, hey, do you want to see what's going on with this product? And that's something that is completely different from what I had just done. But I always knew sales is sales. You just got to get people interested. And yeah, we just transitioned from sexy to trash and started that in 2020. And here we are in end of May of 2025, and we are rocking and rolling with 2 different concepts.
I think it's hilarious. I could totally see how just the amount of times someone wanted to talk, just make a random anecdotal comment about Orange Theory, how over years it's going to get to be a lot.
Did you hear about the workout yesterday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
It's like, buddy, do you know how many workouts I hear about every single day?
Exactly.
Yeah, I could totally see how just the appeal of a B2B business and brand is like music to your ears. But, I mean, for one, you're 2 for 2 on picking brands, because Smash My Trash, another winner. So the next time you're going to buy a brand, let me know. And but can you kind of just lay it out for the audience? I think most people know what Smash My Trash does and what it is, but what is the concept, and why did you, back in 2020, or maybe it was like late 2019 where you really were getting serious about the diligence, why were you like, hey, our next bet is going to be on dumpster crushing?
What we really liked to start was that it wasn't brick and mortar. It was mobile and it was business to business, which was something that we were super interested in. I think I was intrigued from the perspective of we can go and sell a product that doesn't exist in a space that hasn't seen turn, change, evolve, or innovate in the last, let's call it 50 to 100 years, right? If you have a dumpster, this is what you're paying for it. And I will tell you, Patrick, the majority of the time, 90% of the time, the customer pays it just like an electric bill. They pay it because they think they have to pay everything that's associated with it. They don't understand it, but it's a vital part of their day-to-day and you have to have it. And so we love the mobile aspect of what Smash My Trash does. We loved that it was disruptive, and we were actually really intrigued that it was on the customer side. We were advocating for the customer. And if you've heard anything about waste, it's a very different industry in terms of the customer service, the level of service, and really what's provided. And you don't most of the time have a choice. I'll shout out to Justin Haskins, the CEO and founder of Smash My Trash. He's an incredibly bright, innovative guy who really just figured it out. Figured out there was a need in the marketplace. We trusted what he had to say. We were very impressed with him and the early on team that he had put together. But it was very early. We were among some of the first adopters where corporate was just building out their teams. But we weren't totally not used to that. But it was something that, again, we kind of just get in there and figure things out. And the mobile aspect, being able to service multiple customers by making, let's just call it 10 to 20 minute stops, as opposed to having people come into you and you're renting space and you always have just people being housed there. This was something that we felt was very disruptive, and the margins that were told to us were very high. We thought if we could maximize this, we could route it efficiently, we could staff it appropriately. But I will tell you, the one large factor for us was it was low labor, low employees. And that was something where if we had an Orange Theory studio, it was between, let's just call it 12 and 20 employees per location. We have now, and I can get more into it, but you basically start with one truck, a driver, and a salesperson. That's it. And most of the time, if you're starting it, you're the salesperson, right? So you have one truck and one person driving that truck, and you're going to build a business. So your overhead's very low. And there's just less people to deal with. And so that was all very intriguing to us. And the startups were a little more difficult, but I'm sure I can get into modeling of all that too.
Yeah. Well, okay, that's super helpful, and it makes sense after a decade of the grind of brick and mortar that Smash My Trash didn't have any of the headaches that you had to deal with for 10 years. So, and I think you kind of left us at a good spot. So you buy a territory, you're going to need a truck, you're going to need a driver for the truck, and if you're not going to be the sales rep, you got to hire one. How does it work from there? If you're going to pound the pavement, reach out to a bunch of businesses, what's the pitch to them? Are you only making a percentage of the revenue saved, or can you kind of walk us through just how this works from the sales side and how you guys ultimately are making money here?
Yeah, no doubt. So it is a little longer lead time than, let's call it, an intro process at Orange Theory. It's more so going, and you have to really make the customer care about their waste or understand their waste, understand what they're paying. The majority of the time, a operations manager, a warehouse manager, a purchasing director, they oftentimes don't know the mechanics of what they're doing on the waste side. So it's our job, I'll just call myself a salesperson, to walk in the back door of their warehouse and say, hey, I notice you have a dumpster out there. Are you the one who handles this? They immediately are like, why are you asking about my dumpster? Like, that's rare, right? They've had the same hauler for, 20 years doing the same thing. So you immediately start to pique their interest a little bit, but you have to be able to explain, not only are you going to change their process, but you're going to save them money and you're going to create an environmental impact for the companies that care. My whole thing was trying to go in there without a salesy pitch, but even more so having fun around trash, right? I literally would be like, hey man, I know this sounds crazy. I have a Tonka truck that's massive down the street, and all it wants to come do is we have a big drum on the back of this truck, and it goes in and it compresses the amount of waste that you have to reduce the amount of times you have to haul it. And they would be like, okay, all right, let's see it, right? Like, let's see how this changes. And you would go in and try to get a demo. You would try to get them to understand what this did. And showing is everything, and showing is believing. And so we would go and we'd show up and we'd do these demos, and we would literally smash the contents in their containers to show the impact. If it was at 100%, it would go down to 30%. And as we've gotten more experience over time, we certainly understand material, we understand compaction rate, we understand all of the hauling frequency, the right questions to ask. But in the very beginning, you have to go in and ask about their business as opposed to me selling you what we're doing. So it was a hard lift in the beginning, and really you have to kind of know some information. There's not a one size that fits all in this. It was more so like, all right, how do we tailor this to their business specifically, as opposed to, well, we could just go and give them a price, because that really didn't work, because you might be paying a different rate than your neighbor's paying directly next door. So there was a lot of aspects to this that we had to figure out along the way, and I will tell you it's evolved a lot over time too.
You're doing the demo, and obviously you crush the waste. Now the customer, assuming you get them on a contract of some kind, they don't have to have their dumpster emptied nearly as much because you're just compressing it on a certain cadence. But how does that work then? Do you guys just charge like a subscription based on you're able to know how much money you're saving them, and thus you can charge them a price and still be able to make the economic argument of, hey, yes, this is better for the environment, but you're also saving money because of this? How does that
exactly
work?
Exactly, Pat. So basically what you do is you figure out really just how often they're hauling their container. And obviously with experience comes knowing market rates and knowing what haulers charge and doing all of those things. But in the very beginning, you have to understand the mechanics of their waste. You have to understand how many times are they hauling it, what the material looks like, does it compact really well? And our pitch to them from a savings perspective is, listen, if we're going to come in here, we're not only going to make your process more efficient, where you're going to have more space in your container, you're always going to know what's going on with your waste, but we're going to take basically a 10 to 15% savings, and we're going to basically give you the 10 to 15% savings based off what your new hauling frequency is, right? So if we're coming in and saying we're compacting at 70%, we're reducing 70% of the hauls that you do every month. And we're taking that delta and we're splitting it with you. And so we put together an entire analysis that if you're paying $1,000 a month, our goal is to get you to paying all in, let's just call it 20% at $800. Our cost plus your new hauling cost gives you that savings. Once we're able to get all that information and understand what their mechanics are, how well we compact, there's a learning curve. But once we understand that, and once you get better with it, you understand your market, you understand what the hauling rates are, you understand how tonnage works, you understand all these things that I won't bore you with, you become an expert and you become a consultant and you become on their side, right? So they go from saying, hey, if we're hauling this thing 8 times a month, we're going to get you down to 3 or less. So that's our goal, and we base that off a cadence. The more we end up smashing that container, the more the customer saves. It's really important that we get to the bottom part of the container so we compact and we're able to get them at, just like bagging leaves or grass. You don't wait till the very top to kick it down. You take a layered approach so that way you can get as much in that container as possible. And the reality is most customers are hauling a lot of air and they're getting charged for it.
Have you found a certain customer size is key here? Like in your example, for instance, you were saying, hey, if it's $1,000 a month for their dumpster hauls, you guys can save them 20%. So then it all in, they're only paying $800 a month for their waste. Is that enough savings? It's, what is that, $12,000 annually versus, what is that, around 10K is what they're coming down to? Are there business owners who are just like, hey, I don't even care to learn about this because it's not moving the needle massively one way or the other? Do you see there has to be like a certain expense level that they're already spending on waste for this to really be able to catch their attention?
100%. Yes, there are some customers, I would say 90 to 95% of our customers, we can make it not only work, but it works well for them. But are there owners and operators and customers out there that are just like, it's not, I don't want to deal with it, I don't want to change my process, it's working for me? There are, but I would say it's very far and few between, because the reality is we make the on-site efficiency that much greater by smashing as well. So that adds an element of value outside of just the cost savings. I would say the customers that are hauling very frequently, they're a bread and butter customer. Anybody in distribution, warehousing, any type of industrial client, bread and butter customer for us, right? We put them on a route. We show up when we say we're going to show up. They start to get used to our cadence, so they change their operation to make their operation more efficient. I will tell you, there are multiple operations that we work with, Patrick. They have multiple people working on the waste. They have a forklift driver trying to compact it. They have somebody pushing it in line. They have somebody loading it. So now by us taking their labor out of it, we just save them on probably 3 different people by offering that on-site efficiency. So not only just from a cost savings perspective on hauling, but really on the labor side as well. So Smash has been something that I never in my wildest dreams would have understood what went into all of the different aspects of what we do, but there's not just one selling point. It's really adding the value and efficiency on top of the cost savings. But the majority of our customers all find a great deal of savings in it.
It's funny you mentioned the operational efficiency, because my first job was in a warehouse of an HVAC distribution company, and my job was actually the dumpster. And as you were saying that, I realized that we would actually do the same thing. One of the guys who was forklift certified he'd pick up a skid, like a wooden skid, like a pallet, in a certain way, and then I would be the one to hold it vertically until the forks actually came down on top of it. And then I'd get out of the way just in case something happened. But yeah, he would just press the forks against it to smash all the trash inside the dumpster, because we need to make room for it. And yeah, that was
exactly
not the best use of our time by any means. So
but it needed to happen, right? You needed space.
Yeah.
You needed to have the availability of it, and that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Well, so you moved to Florida, you buy a big territory. How many territories are you at today? And at some point, you do what I'm going to call vertically integrate. When did you add the second franchise brand to the portfolio?
We own a large portion of South Florida, both coasts. So everything from, we'll just call it Bradenton, all the way down to Marco Island, and all the way everything throughout. And then we own everything from Homestead, which is just north of the Keys, all the way up to Port St. Lucie. We cover a lot of ground. I believe in that it's about 20 territories that the brand would go by. I'm not totally sure what it looks like in the agreement, but it's about 20 territories, and we span that entire gamut of area and territory. What we found during the full experience was the customer kept asking, do you have hauling? Do you have the availability to just take this over, because what you do is you're gaining trust along the way. They're calling us and we're answering. They're not getting a 1-800 number. They're not getting the runaround. They're not saying, hey, my trash is overflowing and I can't get somebody out here for 3 or 4 days. This is something that they feel a connection. Again, building culture, building a one-on-one experience with our customer is something that had not been done in waste. It just hasn't been done. There are customer managers with large corporations, but they're more on the management side of things, not necessarily just we're going to take care of you and look at every part of your business to help you make it better. That was really important along the way. Late 2022, Justin also started the heavyweight waste model. So he is also the franchisor for that. And I believe we were the first franchisee in heavyweight, which again, we're so accustomed to smashing, we're understanding how to save the customer money. We're just starting to learn this, but we know there's a full turnkey option available for us in the areas that I think we can really provide some value. And once we kept that in-house, and once we were able to understand what the model looked like and understand what the customer was looking like, but also the economics and the efficiencies that we were able to bring our model and increase our margins, was something that we didn't fully know, but we knew what Justin had been on was something that was Smash My Trash. Is like, I can't tell you how many customers are like, wait, is this your idea? I'm like, no, I only wish it was my idea, right? Yeah. We fully believed and trusted what he was doing, and our model specifically for heavyweight is larger containers and less hauling. Because we have the ability to smash, if you're hauling it, let's just call it 8 times a month in a traditional 30-yard container, we offer 61-yard containers. If you're hauling it 8 times a month traditionally, we're going to haul it ourselves maybe 1 or 2 times. It just provides an experience for the customer where we take them out of the middle. You talked about the efficiency, and it's something they don't have to manage anymore, and we try to save them some money while doing that. But the reality is, even if we're not able to, we're able to take it off their plate completely, where they use one vendor, and now it's taken care of.
I'd love for you to dive in on the 3 different players in the ecosystem. It's the customer, so you as in Smash My Trash, the customer, and then the dumpster vendor, let's call it. You're obviously vertically integrated, but before you added that option, explain how like the customer is really kind of in the middle, and then that can, I think you can illustrate how once you become also the dumpster vendor, it's music to the customer's ears.
Yeah, thanks for setting the stage on that one, because it is a big deal. It is an area, and you do put the customer, sometimes they are in the middle because they need the dumpster, but you're providing a service and a disruptive product that not only helps them on site, but a savings perspective. But oftentimes what can happen is the dumpster company doesn't love what we're doing, or the customer gets a call from them saying you can't do this, but the customer's like, well, I don't see why not. They're not touching the dumpster. We have a no-touch policy. There's all these things that we do on our side. We take before and after pictures. We have video. But even more so, we're helping the customer. And so I think a lot of the customers gain that trust and loyalty. But they still have to have both of the vendors. Or in some cases, they're like, hey, we don't want to get caught in the middle. But that has really subsided over the years because we've become such a national player and really a non-negotiable part of their process now. But we felt there was a void in terms of us being able to service the customer fully. Even more so, being able to sell the product turnkey is a lot easier than just coming in with Smash. And smashing's an incredible product. The margins are incredible, but being able to take over the customer service experience in an industry that, let's just call it an NPS score, is 10% or less. And our NPS scores at Smash are in the high 80s or low 90s in a trash space, is a very different experience. So we're like, how do we completely corral the customer? Let's wrap our arms around that customer and let's take them out of the middle to put this on autopilot where they never have to worry about it again. So that's when we got into heavyweight, and let's figure out how we can get more customers, because there are customers that aren't a customer for heavy. Not every customer is a heavyweight customer because of the way the model works, but the majority can work that way, and we figured out new and creative ways to do so.
It's super smart. You really do almost make it a no-brainer for the customer. You're saving them money. It's all one vendor. You're saving them operational efficiency. Yeah, it's a true win-win situation. So that's a really smart move. And are you able to share anything on the margins here of that overall portfolio between heavyweight and smash? And if you're willing to share revenue as well, great. But yeah.
I'll just say the margins on smash are just a little bit higher just because you're just going and you're smashing. You don't have to take the time to haul. Your operational costs are nowhere near what they are in hauling. But I'll say it, I think when it all settles out, and we've seen it teeter-totter a little bit just month over month, but it's staying pretty consistent. It's a 35 to 40% margin business on smash. And heavyweight is, I think, going to settle in about 25 to 30% margin.
And that's all after royalties. Holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like to be transparent. It's something that we've had to put a lot of time and effort into really making the business efficient and figuring things out. Corporate's done a really nice job of bringing up new and upcoming tools to help with that. But even more so, if you do this thing right and you have the ability to price it right, you have the right people working the operation, which I can't say enough about our team. It doesn't go without our team, as I alluded to before. Like our operations people and our sales people and our general manager, I cannot say enough about. They are so incredible at what they do and what they do every day, because there is a lot that goes into this. And the behind the scenes work in this and dealing with the customers and making sure all the logistics are taken out, and oh, this gate is locked and you need the code and the driver just got a flat tire. There's a lot that happens, but man, growth has been just tremendous, and I think it'll all settle in around those margins when it's all said and done.
Is there a benefit here to the scale? Because you're at like, what was that, 20 territories? I know it's an approximation, but some concepts, right, especially like restaurants, you need certain revenue for the margins to actually kick in. Otherwise, you're not covering any fixed costs. So have you seen anything similar with your portfolio?
We still have a lot of territory that we haven't hit everybody, right? I mean, there is so much business still out there that we have not gotten. Yeah, there's an inflection point. Essentially, when you start up, you have all your heavy lift on the front, you got your truck and all of your expenses on the startup end. And it's really hard to pre-sell this product, right? You can go and do demos, but it does make it rather challenging. But at the same time, like, you do only have that truck, so you need to get a little revenue in. And once you hit that inflection point and that kind of economies of scale, you're able to take off from there. And the reality from Smash is that once you get to a certain amount of, let's just call it revenue, you're just adding additional stops where this stop might be right next door and you might have 10 or 15 minutes to go and do that smash. And it's, as you continue to build that, I think originally we thought we could do between 25 and 30 smashes a day. There are some of our routes doing 50 plus. So you're getting more on one truck than we originally had thought. That's kind of the game, right? You have to add a truck as you continue to scale and grow, but that's all part of what we've built into our financial structure and figuring out how to scale it properly. And I will tell you, we're just looking to continue to grow what we're growing, but also look to acquire, look for more territories, and look for, I've heard you on previous pods, looking to acquire maybe underperforming territories or different franchisees that are maybe looking to get out. It's definitely something that we feel we can step in and have some good experience and expertise on what we do and grow those territories too.
And is there, for your organization specifically, for you and Matt, or you guys have like a revenue target you're looking to hit, or is it just, hey, it's working, let's just rinse and repeat until
we do? Yeah, we have so many different, I'll just call it monthly and yearly pro formas built out for revenue and certainly for EBITDA and looking at all of those different things. But we're still trying to figure out what it's going to settle in at, because as you continue to grow, every market's a little bit different. Your landfill costs are different, or your insurance is a little bit higher in this area, or labor's more. It all depends. But yes, from a revenue perspective or a monthly perspective, we're trying to grow by a good chunk every month because we feel the business is out there. But to give you like a full number, it's hard because it wouldn't make a ton of sense unless you knew it incredibly well.
Sure. Is there anything coming down the pipeline within this waste business, because you're specifically right on the cutting edge of it between Smash My Trash and Heavyweight? Was there any other form of vertical integration or innovation that you're looking at that we could add this and level up our business again? Or is this, as far as the waste business, the peak of innovation for the foreseeable future?
It's such a good question, man. I think there's probably something out there. I think at this point, looking at different tools and integrations, or even the likes of AI, to continue to help us enhance what we do or make us more efficient. But the nuts and bolts of what we're doing, it's still a physical product, a physical process that has to be done by a human in order to obtain the ultimate goal, and that's getting their waste handled. And us looking at different tools and integrations, like you said, is part of what our team does every day and our operations team looks at. I mean, we're on demos all the time with different technology companies and things, trying to enhance what we do to continue to add not only a customer service experience, but the sales process, our note-taking abilities, and obviously our operational tasks are something that we're always looking to enhance. But as far as like bringing in some major integration or vertical, I don't know at this point, but they might have something cooking at corporate. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'll be on the lookout for that. And what are you doing on a daily basis as far as like managing the team? Because I'm just noticing, I think a key part of this equation, which is really hard to qualify for, but you're definitely doing a great job of hiring and retaining labor. And I think, I'd imagine it comes down to soft skills. Yeah, you're not doing an amazing job because you were in the best shape with Orange Theory. And in this case, you're not some trash genius. A lot of small businesses just comes down to the soft skills, which are the hardest in my opinion. Dealing with people every day is tough. It's tiring. People are emotional. Shit happens. But like, how do you just approach being a leader and a manager for two now very different organizations?
Yeah, no, great question. And it's something I've always tried to pride myself on, walking the fine line of being a great leader and being a great friend and supporter. And I think I learned early on that being a best friend in a business relationship sometimes can be a little challenging. But I would say, you mentioned it, soft skills, checking in on our team. Are they going through something personally that's affecting them? How do you support them through it? Are they making it personally, professionally, financially? Those are the things that I really look for. And I will tell you, we've had countless conversations and meetings about whether it's an employee or a situation, a customer, and it legitimately, it pulls at my heartstrings in a way that it depends what it is. But we're a big believer, and I talk about our entire organization is a big believer in supporting our people the best way we know how. We're not always going to get it right. We're going to make mistakes along the way, but we're always trying to do the right things for the right reasons. And it's something that checking in on our team, being very available, being responsible, being timely is something that I pride myself on, and showing face. And Matt, too, is just somebody that if you have a problem, we make ourselves so available. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to shoot the shit with you about your weekend, or I'm going to shoot the shit with you about something that's happening with your kids. It's more so because I genuinely care. And I will say, having a smaller staff and having a smaller team allows me to get back to a lot of those things that kind of got lost in Orange Theory. When you scale too quickly or you have too many people in the organization, those relationships, they're hard to keep up with. And so that's what was also really enticing about this, is we could have a really good pulse on our team. And I will tell you, if something happens or there's chit chat going on, I usually hear about it and we can fix it really quickly because, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about this, let's figure out a solution. We are not problem focused. We're very solution oriented. We're people that just, hey, I don't really care what the problem is. Let's figure out how to fix it. And so it's definitely something where if someone needs a shoulder to cry on, I try to make myself available. It's something that I'm really keen on. Matt does the same thing. And I will tell you, our team, I know it's cliche, but it really does operate like a small family. We have our little tiffs. People get into it and they get over it the next day, right? And we all care so much about not only growing the business, but doing it the right way and taking care of the customers. And we all work so incredibly hard to do it. But having a pulse on your team, I think, is the single most important thing. And if that's just calling them to say, hey, great freaking job today. You absolutely crushed it today. I hope you have a great weekend. Or take an extra day off. Go enjoy the beach. Get the hell out of here for a day. That stuff is so important. I don't think there's enough culture like that. I really don't. And I think the good ones have that.
I agree. I would encourage, I think a lot of first-time franchise owners, it's probably an area that they underestimate, that level of awareness and focus on the individual people. It sounds like you're dialed into it, which is awesome, man.
I'm trying. We're trying. Yeah, we're trying. But it is hard. It's very difficult. And I would say, being an entrepreneur, you know this as well as anybody, man. I think it always comes down to people. And if you have the wrong people, or you're the wrong type of leader, or there's something that isn't working, taking a hard look at yourself and figuring out why it's not working. Yeah. But you got it. Headaches they're prevalent in entrepreneurship or franchising. Very prevalent. And figuring out how to deal with them is stressful. Yep.
Yeah. No, definitely, man. Well, look, it's been awesome, man, to hear kind of the 2 chapters so far in your journey, and I'm excited to see. I'm sure there'll be a chapter 3, 4, and 5.
If I'm
beyond
lucky
this.
enough, man.
Yeah. Is there anywhere online where people could follow along with your journey? Any social media platform or website as well that they could get in touch or just follow
Yeah,
along?
I personally try to stay off of social media as much as I can, just
Smart
because
man.
of the rabbit hole I go down. But I am on Instagram because I follow a lot of businesses. And honestly, Patrick, that's how I found you and really have just enjoyed your work over the years. And I still am
Appreciate
a
it.
subscriber to The Wolf, and I read what's going on. And it's definitely something, if you want to follow me, I don't post much, but I'm a family guy. I love to just hang out and travel. I'm a regular dude. But at B Borock is my Instagram, and other than that, smashmytrash.com. You can figure out exactly what we do. And if you go to South Florida, I promise if you inquire, you'll get a call within 12 to 15 seconds from the cost of inquiry for us to see where you're at. So
I love it. I love it. Always dialed in. All right, man. Appreciate you coming on, and we'll have to get you on once you've officially taken over the whole state of Florida.
I'll try. I appreciate you having me, man. This was an
Yeah.
honor and something that I've been excited about for a while, and I can't say enough about the work you do. So I appreciate you always putting business first and getting the real raw story from everybody. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Patrick.